אנחנו עוברים להרצאה של דניאל ליס.
יש מצג.
האיש שלנו בבאזל. הוא מהאוניברסיטה של באזל. שם הוא עשה את הדוקטורט על הנושא Imagined Kinship. Nigerian Igbo in Israel and the question of belonging. וכרגע הוא עושה פוסט-דוקטורט על הנושא באזל and ביתא ישראל, 1830 to 1865, Protestant mission and Jewish identity in Ethiopia. והיום הוא ידבר על הנושא Joining the conversation from a distance, the involvement of Jewish identity among the Nigerian Igbo and the Beta Israel from Ethiopia.
Thank you. I couldn't pay attention to what you were saying, but I guess you were. But I guess you were missing that I can announce the publication of my book. It just came out, and I made all the effort that it would be here today, but UPS messed it up, and so you can just take the order form which is outside. No, I don't have. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think Gabriel Motzkin made a very interesting remark that he said that groups that want to be Jewish eventually become Jewish. It's a question, is it really like that? Because I think if we would investigate, we would find maybe groups that at one point claimed Jewish origin and today they don't. So it's a question, we could discuss about this. But I was working for the past 7 years, I was working on a group like that, the Nigerian Igbo. And before I start with the Igbo, I want to talk about myself. I'm a Jew, and I believe that some of my ancestors came from here. However, I know my family history about 6 generations, maybe on some lines, but that's it. I have no way of proving that I'm from the tribe of Judah. Okay? So when we talk about other people, we just should be aware about our own personal myths. There has been a number floating around that if we look at the Jewish population in the Roman Empire, that today there would be about 200 million Jews. And Sergio de la Pergola certainly has a comment on that. But the question then is, where are these people? Where are the descendants of those people? Maybe it's the Igbo, maybe not. I started my research about 7 years ago in Basel, in the city of Basel, which you probably know. And I met a Nigerian guy, and we had a conversation, and he gave me his name, Liwai. So I asked him right away, but this is a Jewish name? And he said, yes, of course, we, the Igbo, are Jews. So I asked him, how do you know? And then he said, well, my grandparents told me so. So like my grandparents told me that I'm Jewish, his grandparents told him that he's Jewish. After this conversation, I traveled to Nigeria, and I really found emerging Jewish communities, Igbos practicing normative Judaism. And I took the opportunity to ask every single Igbo on the way if he was Jewish, and the answers were all yes. Of course, what it means Jewish, it's another thing. But clearly, there's a trend of more and more Nigerian Igbo turning towards normative Judaism. And there has been estimations about 3,000 to 5,000 Igbo that practice normative Judaism. However, the phenomenon 3,000 to 5,000, but there's no way of proving anything with numbers here, I think. But there are estimated about 25 to 30 communities in Nigeria. Compared to the overall number of Igbo, 20 to 30 million, again, a number hard to verify, this is a very, very small number. However, the connection to Jewish community, to Jewish identity is much larger. You can find it ethnically defined, politically, socially, and also historically. That's why I asked every single Igbo I asked, told me, yes, there is a connection, something. So, and moreover, you have today a large number of Sabbatarians, Igbo Sabbatarians, that adapt more and more Jewish ritual into their religious practice. And moreover, you have central Igbo village communities that trace their origin through the mythical figure of Eri, the son of God, and thereby they claim to be from the lost tribe of God. And here we can see a clear influence on on Ovadia Yosef's decision to the Beta Israel, where he said they are the lost tribes of Dan. Because this myth of Gadite origin became really popular from the 1970s on in Nigeria. So here you have a map of Nigeria, and in the southeast you can see the territory of the Igbo. Now, after my visit to Nigeria, I reckoned, well, if so many people, so many Igbo say they're Jews, I'm sure there must be some of them in Israel. And so it was. Actually, in the 1990s, an Igbo fought with all the gatekeeping institutions in Israel. So it means he fought for recognition with the chief rabbinate. He went to the high court. He fought with the interior ministry. And he said, I want to be recognized as a Jew because I'm an Igbo, and I don't want to convert to Judaism because I'm already Jewish. And here it's quite interesting to see what the rabbis said. And here is one, is a rabbinical judge, Jacob Goldenberg, from the regional rabbinical court in Tel Aviv. He said, a Kushi from the area of Biafra, that is in the state of Nigeria in Africa, appeared in front of the rabbinical court and asked the court to recognize his Jewishness on grounds that he belongs to the tribe of the Igbos that believe to celebrate a few festivals that are similar to Jewish custom and therefore believe to be Jews. The rabbinical court refused to recognize his demand because we know all the Kushim there as fully Gentiles, and we do not know about Jews there. What is he saying actually? He doesn't know about the concept of the Igbo being Jewish. The chief rabbinates and Israel's Supreme Court rejection of the Igbo's Jewish identity prompted the Igbo who followed in the footsteps of this man in Israel to gain acceptance through conversion. And I did some field work in 2006 and 2007 with a group of Nigerian Igbo who had settled in South Tel Aviv and were in the process of converting to Judaism under the leadership of Chai ben Daniel, an Igbo himself who had converted earlier. Chai ben Daniel strongly believed that the Igbo originated from the lost biblical tribes of Gad and Ephraim. Nevertheless, the Igbo Jewish community in Tel Aviv had chosen the path to go through conversion because being recognized as Jews without it seemed not be an option at this point of time. Without an official rabbinical mission or inquiry, no change was to be expected, and Shlomo Amar said himself, the case of the Igbo from Nigeria has been discussed in the past by the chief rabbis from Israel, and they came to the conclusion that one cannot recognize them as Jews. Today, there is no new evidence that would change this decision. Accordingly, they have to convert like everybody else. So that's what they did. They converted to Orthodox Judaism. However, because they started this process when they were illegal in the country, they were deported. So it's quite interesting. Halachically, they were Jewish at the end, even if there's discussion if they were before or not, but they were deported because it was against the state law. So there is a conflict. Who are the Igbo now? The ancestors of today's Igbo, from only a few generations back, would likely to have a difficulty understanding the term Igbo. In its various forms, the term Igbo was used mostly by outsiders to refer to slaves. But make no mistake, the Igbo, they know their genealogy. So many people, they know 7 generations back. So they know genealogy. The scholarly literature generally agrees that the concept of an Igbo nation did not exist in most of the Igbo-speaking area until the British colonization during the 1920s. Along and east of the lower river Niger, Igbo speakers consisted of a multitude of politically autonomous village groups dispersed over a substantial area. Their political autonomy and geographical range had fostered considerable linguistic and cultural diversity, which had precluded the development of a common identification. Much of the concept of an Igbo nation started to evolve in the 18th century and in the diaspora during the transatlantic slave trade, when a great many number of Igbo speakers were enslaved and brought to the Americas. Only during the diaspora and amid the spread of ideas of nationalism did Igbo speakers become conscious of their difference and commonalities with other emerging identities. And Olaudah Equiano was the first Igbo in 1789 to write about the Igbo. So he's actually, we could say he's the founder of a modern Igbo idea of nationhood. And moreover, he was not also the first one to Igbo to write about the Igbo. He also connected the Igbo to the Jews. One of the things he mentioned, for instance, is 8-day circumcision. Now, 8-day circumcision always existed among the Igbo, but circumcision was also done at various later stages, so until 13 or after 2 months. But what is important that in time, this tradition became more important. It became a core Igbo tradition. And today, if you meet Igbo in Israel or in Switzerland or wherever, even if they don't keep any of Igbo traditions, they will circumcise their sons on the 8th day. It has become a central Igbo custom. Again, such a process of circumcision becoming the central Igbo custom can be looked at as an interplay among Igbo voices, which shape the concept of what being Igbo means, non-Igbo voices who conversed about this relation, and also Jewish sources who validated or devaluated Igbo claims of Jewish identity. We always say, these groups, they claim to be Jewish, and it is an idea by Christian missionaries. What about the Jews? What did Jews say about this group? So it's a conversation that all together are actually doing. It's not something that somebody starts and the other. I think we have to think about this. Now, what are the Jewish sources? When in 1841 an expedition was sent on the river Niger to make treaties against the slave trade with the chiefs in the Igbo area, Solomon Herschel, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of the emerging British Empire in London, and his Sephardi counterpart, the Chacham David Meldola, sent letters on the expedition, inquiring about any brethren on the banks of the river Niger, because few Europeans had visited there. And here we have the letter of David Meldola. How did it came this idea up that there would be lost tribes of Israel on the banks of the river Niger? He must have come somehow to this conclusion. So this is 50 years after Olaudah Equiano, the guy we saw before, wrote his book about the Igbo. So some of those ideas might have influenced the letter of the rabbi. The expedition was a disaster, and although other Jewish rabbis continued to suspect the existence of Jewish lost tribes on the banks of the river Niger, the focus soon shifted to Ethiopia. We are now in the 1840s, 50s, 60s. And it's exactly when we have the appearance of Christian missionaries who go to the Beta Israel and who report back to Europe about the existence of Jews in Ethiopia. Now, Stern, and he was mentioned today before by Tudor Parfit, he was just one of many that went to the Beta Israel, but he was the first Jew who had converted to Protestantism. And that's now really, that's a provocation for Jews in Europe. And I think he was kind of a trigger for Jews in Europe and in other places to contact the Beta Israel and to get in touch with them. because the Judaism in Ethiopia certainly differed from Judaism that we know. And what was missing was a conversation that the Beta Israel were integrated in a, let's say, in a global Jewish conversation. And I'm taking this concept from Alana Cooper, who has just published a book on Bukharan Jews, which I think is very interesting in this perspective. And Jacques Fetlovich was also mentioned before. He was crucial in bringing the Beta Israel not to Judaism, but to the Judaism that we know. Because I think the concept of Jews or Judaism was something well known in Ethiopia for a very long time. It's not something new to Ethiopia. I think the main difference between the Beta Israel and the Igbo in Nigeria is that in Ethiopia we had Christianity and also influences of Islam. Both of Christians and Muslims know about Jews. Not the same way like in southern Nigeria. Before I speak about him, it can be claimed with confidence that no existence of a normative Jewish community or larger group of normative Jews within the Igbo-speaking area or in reasonable distance from it is documented. Even if such a community existed in the Igbo-speaking area at one point, it would have had no opportunities to connect to other communities of normative Judaism, and thus maintain a clearly recognizable normative Jewish identity. I hold that Jews who wanted to continue in the changing concept of Jewish identity have survived or established themselves as Jews only through periodic access to a Jewish conversation, whether in its written or oral form. Access to a conversation of what normative Judaism is, or the ability to stay in conversation with other Jews, seems to have been crucial in maintaining or re-establishing a Jewish identity. And here we have the big difference for today. Jewish knowledge and practice, if you want to learn about Judaism, you can do it. So even if in Europe, let's say, one generation forgot how to read Hebrew, the changing body of Jewish knowledge was out there and you could access it in the next generation. So for the Igbo, for a long time, such a conversation did not exist. But there was no dialogue between Jewish communities in the West and the Igbo. However, the concept of what being Igbo meant continued to evolve, and it was continuously linked to a Jewish connection. And here we have a slide of Horton Africanus, one of the leading African intellectuals in the 19th century, Sierra Leone. He also wrote about the Igbo, and he also he quite specifically said how the Igbo from Israel arrived in Nigeria. Now he himself was from Sierra Leone, where many Igbo slaves were settled by the British. And as soon as the mission started to spread from Sierra Leone to Nigeria, this concept of Igbo-ness, of Igbo nationhood, was brought to the Igbo area, I would say. The Igbo in the Igbo territory, I'm not speaking about the diaspora, were colonized by the British at the start of the 20th century. Now this flag is from 1914, when the British created the Nigerian flag. I think it's quite interesting. What is the Star of David at that time? I mean, Gershom Scholem, he has written about how the Star of David has become a Jewish symbol. It was always around, and Jews used it, but how did it become such a central symbol for Judaism? And I think we could adapt this concept also for the Igbo becoming more central in our conversation. And let's not forget that the British proposed the Uganda proposal in 1904, so they knew about Zionism, and the Star of David was in use by the Zionist movement already for some decades, so they were heavily involved in this idea. So they must have known about the significance of this symbol. And then, so we have the establishment of the British colony of Nigeria, and more missionaries arriving in the Igbo territory, and writing ethnographies also about the Igbo. This is another missionary that was very influential, George Boston, who wrote about the Igbo, and he writes in detail how central Igbo customs are connected to the Israelites. Of course, it's an ethnography, and you could wonder who reads ethnographies, but there was a lot of change affecting the Igbo at that time. So they were moving to the cities, they were moving out of the tradition, they were becoming Christians. If an Igbo who didn't know about tradition wanted to know about his own tradition, that's the sort of book he would read. So it's a very central ethnography. And so who were the people who were reading his ethnography? You have people like Chinua Achebe, whom you might know, the famous Igbo writer. Or you have Nnamdi Azikiwe from the state founding generation of Nigeria, also an Igbo, who read ethnographies like this and said, Boston, he's the expert on Igbo tradition. Now, with the establishment of the State of Israel, and just before Nigerian independence, the Igbo actually were crucial in establishing ties between Israel and Nigeria, but also they were very, they strongly desired to have a close cooperation between their specific area, the southeast, and Israel. And here we have Nnamdi Azikiwe meeting with the Israeli ambassador in London in front of the picture of Herzl, and that was the wish of Azikiwe that his picture would be taken in that way, because he was a big fan of Zionism and said, we have to do the same thing, we have to do the same thing. And there was a close cooperation, and even there was a program to start a Jewish mission in Nigeria with the support of Ben Tzvi, and we have heard it earlier today. But in '67, we have the outbreak of the war in Biafra. And again, the Igbo understood themselves as being victims like the Jews, and they got also a lot of sympathy here in Israel for sharing the fate Jews had, Jews survived during the Holocaust. You know what I mean. So I conclude. The myth of the Igbo belonging to Jewish identity has varied over time. But it is precisely the continuity of that claim and the change that warrants study, I think. Growing Igbo consciousness and Jewish identification have become so intertwined that it is impossible to separate one from the other. So the question, in my perspective, is not whether the Igbo are Jews, but they're definitely part of the Jewish conversation.